Okay. Okie dokie. All right, so I think all of you know the drill. You all look like familiar faces here. So I'm not going to go through all of that. What I'm thinking of doing when we get to, I think, aphorism 100 or something, I'm not sure what the number is. When we finish book one, I'd like to do a session just sort of assessing what we think Nietzsche is up to here. And we'll have proceeded far enough to have a general idea of what we think of his method and what we think he's trying to say one way or the other, even though we're doing individual things here. I think there's probably a good reason for breaking at book one. There may not be, but, hopefully there is. Okay. So we're going to do, let's see, aphorism 35, heresy and witchcraft. And I thought the very last sentence of this was, there's a couple of interesting things in here because and I don't know if it's just an intentional use of the word evil, because he seemed to disallow this sort of idea, and yet here he's very casually mentioning that they were evil human beings, heretics and witches. And the last sentence, the Reformation, which was in a way a redoubled intensification of the medieval spirit at a time when that was no longer accompanied by a good conscience, produced both in the greatest abundance. And I was trying to figure out what he was meaning by a good conscience in this, as if the implication is that in the beginning, people were members of the church, and the best I could come up with is that it was new in the 1st century AD, the 2nd century AD, it was new. And then in the medieval spirit was rigid conformity. The church was the only authority, this sort of thing. And I think that that's what he's trying to get at. Okay, Audrey.
I was going to actually ask, I'm glad you went right to that one, but because to me it seems very satirical. It doesn't make sense with the rest of what we've read before. And so I thought of it as being satirical, and I know that I can't think of him in the future, but let me tell you, he had that in his writings, I thought. So
no, that's good. That's a good observation. I think you're right. I hardly ever begin with the idea that he might be satirical. Go ahead, Audrey. Sorry.
No, I mean, basically I put that out and see what other people think. I just
Okay, Jason.
because I think that there is an issue with the Reformation with him, but
yeah,
so
yeah. Well, this may be the first shot across the bow, in a way, for the development that you're talking about coming down the road. So this is like an opening into that. Jason.
I think the 3 words, they are connected together, right? Witchcraft, heresy, reformation. And when we hear these 3 words, we have the different, at least me, okay, I have the different concept, right? Reformation kind of think about a good thing. And the heresy, we kind of think about the religious, if they think witchcraft, we think about something like superstitious. And I think Nietzsche tried to bring here, he talked about heresy is the pendant of witchcraft. Okay, and surely no more harmless and the less of all anything essential. So heretic and the witches are 2 species of human. I'm not sure. I think the evil doesn't mean really evil. That means, so I think to him, to Nietzsche try to tell us is Reformation, heresy, witchcraft, they all kind of same thing, okay, and kind of the revolution to change something, okay. That's what I read from this one, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the Reformation opened up the whole idea that you could kind of make up your own interpretation of the Bible. That was how all the different Protestant sects developed. Each one is differentiated more or less by an interpretation that's now removed from the church, but is just as compromised in terms of rigidity and obedience to the authority of whatever the church might be. Mark, your hand was up, now it's not. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'll make a comment. I got to be careful here. So I agree with the previous comment that it's probably satirical. I think satirical is a little bit questionable though, because Nietzsche, and I haven't read this in a really long time, and I read other stuff since then, but he uses these moral terms, good and evil, in like three different ways in different works, and often multiple ways in the same work. So it's hard to know what he's actually advocating for a lot of times. Sometimes he uses them in the conventional way that most people do. Like, I like things that are good and I dislike things that are bad. Sometimes he uses them in a more objective way, like he's describing the phenomena in society, like what is generally considered evil and what is generally considered good. And then I don't know how far we've gotten into this in this work. And then later, he actually switches them where he prefers the evil to good in some of his writing. So it can be really confusing and difficult to understand exactly what he's talking about. And the process of satire, I think, is a process where he's going through kind of questioning the conventional ideas about good and evil. So he's stating them as they're normally stated, but kind of like with a satirical twist. And that leads him into transforming them in his own mind later. So I think that's correct, but it's not exactly satire. It's kind of a process of him reevaluating the conventional ideas. That's the way I see it.
Okay, all right. And you may not be unfamiliar with the conceit of the meetup. We don't care what's coming down the road. We're going to get there when we get there. But I appreciated your comment because even here, he's expressed different senses of evil. And so in my mind, we're just beginning to really see this conflict in his own expressions. Barbara.
Well, this one I'll admit is confusing because he says that to think otherwise than is customary is not the effect of a superior intellect. It's the effect of strong evil inclination. Now, in previous aphorisms,
You're on another. Which aphorism are you referring to?
heresy and witchcraft,
Okay.
yeah. So the very first line of it, he seems to be criticizing heretics and witches for the very thing he was kind of valorizing the great man for. So the great man, had no real social conscience. He was just great. He imposed his will on other people, on the society, and in a sense, and he was out of the norm. So heretics and witches are out of the norm too. So the question is, why does he not like them just as much as the people that he does like, the great men who would risk suicide, as we talked about, for an idea, or pursue their inner truth no matter what? It seems like heretics and witches are kind of in that category, except the words are heretic and witch. They're not, they don't have positive connotations. So that's kind of confusing. Now, at the end too, when he says that the Reformation produced both, he says it was it sort of doubled down on medievalism without the sort of inner core that made medievalism good, if it was good, but at
Yeah.
least without its inner core, right? So now he's saying that produced heretics and witches, and I can kind of see that, because what he's saying is that because the Reformation sort of had false underpinnings or no genuine underpinnings, it produced a reaction against it's no, it didn't though. I mean, that's inaccurate. What it did was that it found heretics and witches maybe everywhere it looked. So that is so confusing. I'm going to stop there.
Okay, let me see if I can get my thoughts together on this. In one way, I feel like, and I'm going to go with a whole satirical approach here, but I'm not sure that he's actually advocating anything. Well, he may be, but I think that it's an observation. I know I've said that before about a lot of different things, but I think that he's offering an observation rather than, I'm just going to leave it at that. Jeff.
Yeah, well, basically, I agree with all the last 3 or 4 speakers have been saying, and so all I'm going to add here, I guess, is it's just how to think of it so that it doesn't feel strange, and it doesn't involve peeking ahead, but of course, it's easier to do if you're sort of used to his spirit. Which is that basically it's in literature. Sometimes called indirect speech. He's speaking in the voice of somebody else. He's talking about, instead of doing the usual academic thing, it says, well, putting a whole bunch of like bracketing, phrases, nested phrases around things and making it like impossible to read. The aphorisms are forcing him to basically always stay in the moment, right? So then then it falls on our shoulders then to say, okay, he's not endorsing or panning heretics and witches. When he says that they're evil, it's really got quotes around it, right? That they're called evil, right? And so he's trying to uh, rephrase what the comments people are saying in a way that's more direct. Like when we do that. Someone says, well, I don't have an example at the tip of my tongue, but they say something. They use a euphemism for something, and then you say, "What you really mean is you don't want to go." It's that sort of thing. That's really what seems to be happening here, and that works for pretty much all this. The last thing about the Reformation and the redoubled intensification. That's a little bit of an open question, but I think Barbara got that right, which is that basically the spirit of finding problems is so strong that we're basically turning what used to be decent people into evil or duplicitous at least people. So anyway, I think we're on the right track. It's just that you have to do that everywhere. It's not that he's getting to another spot. He's always in multiple places at once.
Yeah, for sure. Andre.
Well, I really loved, all of this that I've heard from Mark and from Barbara and now Jeff and Jason. It's interesting because it is an aphorism. It's not just this is a text and this is what I'm telling you. So it's interesting. I'm questioning the first sentence I really had problems with. By the last sentence, I said, "Oh, this is somewhat satirical," but it's an aphorism that's satirical, which is already makes another aphorism if really. But thinking in a way, I have the Kaufman, thinking in a way that is not customary is much less the result of a superior intellect. It's much less of a result, which it's confusing me what that means. And is it less? And then it is the result of strong evil inclinations that detach and isolate one, and that are defiant, nasty, and malicious. Heresy is the pendant of witchcraft, and surely no more harmless, and least of all anything essentially venerable. And then, I mean, I don't know, I could read the whole thing, but, and probably we should read the whole thing over and over and over again. Because I think there's a lot of nuances in here, and knowing him, and also knowing his in and out of feeling the way he feels or felt, who knows what he was thinking at the time, but it seems to me what Barbara was saying, that it became evil because since the Reformation and the doubling down, it's become so much more evil. I mean, we intuit it that way now. And you don't even have to use the word evil. Oh, she's a witch. Oh, she's, and it's usually a she, by the way. But anyway, okay, that's all. Thinking
Okay,
out
let
loud, I would.
me spin something here. Because I remember this, I forgot it, and you were just reminded me by reading that first sentence. Thinking in a way that is not customary is much less the result of a superior intellect. And I think that he's not denying that thinking in a way that is not customary isn't what a superior intellect does. But the superior intellect has greater control or sensibility or desire for certainty or something than a lot of other people that were just doing something different to be doing something different. Barbara.
Well, okay, so yeah, I see what you're saying. That phraseology in the first sentence is confusing, but I'm still going to go to the last sentence, which is about the Reformation, and he defines it as a movement backward. That's the first thing. Now, I don't believe that, but it sounds like that's what he's saying, because he's saying they're doubling down on the medieval spirit, when actually in the Reformation, I don't think was doing that, but let's just say he thought so. But it's not authentic now, because it's a look backwards. It's a move that doesn't have the authentic core, but maybe has the superficial aspects of the past. So he's saying that produces nothing better than witches and heresy. It won't, so by extension, it won't produce the great man. It won't produce it's not an evolutionary step up, because you can only the reaction to it, which would be witches and heretics, is only as good as the thing it's reacting to. And
Yes.
he's kind of saying that this is not genuine, maybe.
Yeah, Mark. Mark.
I'm like not in a really.
Jeff.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Who's
Well,
talking?
Mark is back, I think. Yeah, I can see
Can you
him
hear me?
now.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for your patience. So Lindsay and Audrey's comments were really helpful for me. So because when I first read it, I kind of read it quickly, and I had a kind of very simplistic analysis of that first sentence, and I tended to counterpose the superior intellect to I can't remember the exact wording, the person with evil intents or something. And now after it was reread a couple times, I realized that it's not really a counter position, it's more like, or at least the way I see it now, it's more like it's arguing, yes, the superior intellect can incline a person in a way that's against the conventional dominant thought. But that's not the main thing that inclines a person away from the conventional dominant thought. And he describes that to evil. I think of that kind of in terms of social alienation. Like if you're in a downtrodden position because of your ethnicity or I don't know, your sexuality, or it could even be something simple as your height, or something that puts you at a low social status, and you're imposed upon significantly by social conventions and people around you. That's going to build up a kind of a resentment and an opposition to the social norms, which might not have a sophisticated intellectual manifestation the way it does in Nietzsche, or like a radical thinker like Spinoza or Marx or somebody like that who comes up with ideas that are very contrary to the dominant one. For most people in that position, they don't have the intellectual resources to articulate a vision that's kind of like alternative and developed like that. They just have the resources to articulate a sort of hostility or a resentment to the dominant social order. So I think he is saying that that those are kind of two different paths towards kind of like obeying or rejecting the dominant ideas. But the idea of being socially rejected or alienated, is stronger than the one of having the ability to think outside the box that that most people are inside of. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, you can turn your video off because you're making me dizzy. So, okay, thanks. Okay, what I was just thinking of is, I wonder how he would characterize Luther. So was Luther a superior intellect who, by going against the existing church and reforming the apparent abuses, right, of the church, was he just misunderstood by practically everybody? He didn't even realize himself what he was unleashing. Jeff.
Yeah, I'm on that same topic, but the last sentence, the Reformation being a redoubled intensification of the medieval spirit. I think with that, and this is, I don't know if he refers to this elsewhere in his stuff, and we're not doing it that way anyway. But what he's thinking, but it is, I think it's inescapable that he's got ideas that he doesn't explain every time he brings them up. And so the one that this one now seems like to me is the idea that the Reformation was a doubling down on the imagistic aspects of Catholicism, right? They really dug into the paintings, and then they got the gore of the crucifixion and stuff going like that. Whereas what it's reacting to, with, like you mentioned Luther, which is convenient, right? Because Luther's, there's like, well, it's about the words, it's the power of the word as opposed to the power of the image. So I think that accounts then for this way of referring to the Reformation as the redoubled intensification of the medieval spirit, which is to say the imagistic. That's what I'm calling, the manipulation people view by images, at a time when that was no longer accompanied by a good conscience. In other words, they're saying, okay, know that we've got this new consciousness brought to us by the printing press, right? of words, but we're going to go the other way. we're going to do the old thing. It's definitely a throwback. It's not the Reformation is not an accommodation. It's a doubling down. Yeah, and then produce both in the greatest abundance. I guess that's the last little mystery for me. I guess the both is the medieval spirit. Well, that would make sense if you're doubling down on it, and then no longer I guess good conscience is the other thing of both there. That I don't quite have that ironed out yet.
That was here. Okay. Okay, Barbara, your hand was up, and now it's not. Did you have something more you wanted to say? There we go.
Yeah, I'm sort of not sure about this one, honestly, but it does seem to me that even Luther and Calvin, which were the Reformation, they were associated with the Reformation that we usually think of the Catholic Church, not the people who went their own way and did their own type of church, but they just simply wanted the Catholic Church to go back to what it originally had been doing, which was based on the writings of Saint Augustine. So that probably is what he means when he's saying that they were trying to redouble the medieval spirit, but it wasn't time for that. So it was no longer accompanied by a good conscience. To me, means that wasn't the authentic thing. So while Luther, I think, was right to say that the Catholic Church needed to be reformed, what he's saying here is that the way it was done was that it was a look backwards without this solid foundation that it had in medieval times. And so it wasn't really about the times that they were entering, the modernity that they were really entering. And he's probably saying that's why it produced a kind of inferior reaction of heresy and witchcraft rather than a more elevated reaction, or itself being more elevated to change the world.
Yeah.
You're looking at me like,
Well, no, I'm not disagreeing with you. I have this thought bubbling around in my head after that thing I said about Luther. Luther presumed that he could get the church to go back to its old ways. They wouldn't be selling whatever they call that, promises into heaven or something for you give us $1,000 and we'll, pray for you or something, indulgences. That was one of the things. He had 99 things that he wanted the church to stop doing. And the church was already corrupt in that sense. And most people at the time probably knew that. But by breaking away from the church in the way that he did, I think there was more. I think he was even advocating a German Bible instead of a Latin Bible. I'm not quite, did he do that? I think he did do that, right? So what he didn't foresee was that by breaking with the church that way, he was opening the door to, and I'm sure a lot of the founders of presumptive Christian modified churches were considered heretics at the time, right? They even were back in the old days. Anyway. Okay. Are we done? I guess we're done. All right, 36, last words. And I don't know how many of you read the Credo and the Phaedo over again to get a notion of what who the dying Socrates was. And I don't know if you want me to go over that or not. So I
don't
won't.
know any the references. Can anyone explain to me?
Oh, well, these were all emperors of Rome, right? Augustus and Nero and Tiberius.
Yeah, I
And
know people, but I just don't know the background. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, okay, but that's okay. Socrates was condemned to death. Well, he wasn't condemned to death. He had a choice, exile or death. And he chose death because he elevated philosophy. And what he had done, and I don't know that Socrates did this so much as Plato did it, but he had isolated the soul, the intellectual part of humanity from the body. And so giving up the body meant that the soul could then pursue truth without the encumbrance of an earthly existence and needing food and having to deal with other people and all the rest of it. That's the case he makes in the Phaedo. that his soul will now be free from the burden of the body. And he's also going to because Crito attempts to help him escape, and he chooses not to because he made a decision. The Athenians gave him the choice. He chose to die, and he is going to go through with that because that was a commitment that he made. And I think that's just a picture of the dying Socrates that I think Nietzsche is referring to here. And I really like this idea. I don't know how many. It's like, this is another play on the Shakespeare, right? The Tempest, all the world's a stage, and all the people are really players on it. And that's partly what he is hinting at here, at least, or suggesting. Especially with these really, really wonderful quotes, which I don't know if they're authentic or not. I suppose they are. And Nero, especially, like, what an artist perishes with me. So they were actors. They were not themselves. Socrates was very much himself, the gadfly of Athens. Jason.
I I think here I don't know all the background, but basically he quote the emperor, the Roman emperor, their last word, and then he also quoted in Datis, like something like what an artist perish with me. Talk about spectator perish with me. All this kind of last word, and he kind of praised Socrates. Because what I read in Socrates is in Phaedrus, right? In Phaedrus, his last word, and he famously said, I think the man should die in quiet, something like this. He said, "Oh, one must die in silence. Stop crying," because he sent the woman, his wife, away because he said, "Man must die in silence." Okay, so I think to Nietzsche, all this emperor, you try to make a good word for yourself, and they think, it's better just like Socrates, be quiet, okay, and then that's what I see,
Okay. Nicole.
This just reminds me of this like authenticity, like not putting on a mask when you're with other people. Because I don't know, sometimes when we are with a certain group of people, we tend to be a different version of us, but that might not be the most authentic version of you. It's not the version you have when you're most comfortable with yourself. For example, I feel like for me, I always have this kind of imagination of myself being like a lady from the 19th century speaking eloquently and like like a philosopher, but I'm not that. I'm not that at all. I think in reality I'm just like a very silly and bouncy sort of like girl, sometimes can be quite ridiculous but not very eloquent. So it's kind of like your imagination, like you imagine the version of yourself, when you think you're putting this mask versus like the real you. How do you pick, because we only have one life. Do you want to wear the mask all the time until you die? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think that might be a sort of a subtext behind this particular aphorism. I think what he's suggesting is that the emperors were presumptively great men who pretended to be that role. They put on that act all the time.
Do you think when you put on the act all the time, like fake it until you make it, and eventually it embeds and incorporate into you and becoming part of you, then you become that person?
Yeah. I think people do that. Yeah. Jason.
Yeah, one sentence I think is interesting. He talked about life dash is a long death. I don't know how you think about this. Just, I think this sentence is just, stick in my mind. I think that has some meaning to me, but I'm not sure how to express it.
Okay, then the presumption here is that Tiberius died silently because he was suffocated to death by the people around him. And Nietzsche is imagining that his last words might have been, "Life is a long death. Fool that I was to shorten the lives of so many. Was I made to be a benefactor? I should have given them eternal life. Then I would have watched them die forever. For that I had such good eyes. What a spectator passes with me." This is a similar kind of thing, especially the last part of that line. And I think it suggests that that's a more explicit notion of not knowing who he actually was. And so he had the power. Tiberius was one of the most brutal Roman emperors. And he exercised it without really thinking of what he was doing one way or the other, at least in Nietzsche's presumption. Audrey.
Nicole, your hand was up. Does it go down? Oh,
Yeah, I changed my mind. Yeah, you go ahead.
okay. Well, I'm confused between what everybody's saying, because it sounds like you're all agreeing with each other, but then you're not. So maybe I'm just having a hard time with words today, and reading these words. But it sounds to me like when it says in the second paragraph, Tiberius died silently, the most tormented of all self-tormentors, was genuine and no actor. So, one could say, oh, he's praising that. And what may have passed through his mind in the end, and he, says, oh my God, I could have made people suffer even more. And, it goes on and on and on. So he's showing that he's, twisting it and saying, but he's a real horrible person. So he's not necessarily saying that be silent. So I don't know what he's saying here. I mean, I think it's an interesting observation, and I'm going to keep using Lindsay's word here. This is an observation. He said it in one of his moments, and I take it to be an observation. And I don't know what he's advocating here, and don't care.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, just get it out there, Audrey. I just recalled that Socrates' last words were, "Sacrifice the cock to Asclepius for me." And this was to Phaedo or Crito, one of the other two. Those
Well,
were
that
his.
clears it up.
Then he drank the stuff, and that was the end of that. So I don't know what to do with that. I just thought I'd mention it. Nicole.
Yeah, I like actually Audrey point this out. I think maybe he meant he didn't put on the mask because he's just a moron from the beginning to end. I don't pretend I'm a good person. I'm not. That's it.
Well, okay then. I don't know where to go with that. Okie dokie. Does anybody else have any more thoughts on this one? Okay.
No, we have
37.
20 minutes. Yeah.
What?
Do we have 20 minutes or another 40 minutes?
We have another 40. This is the hour and a half version today.
Oh, okay, great, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, 37, owing to 3 errors. And I totally agree with what he's saying here, that I think he's really nailed a lot of what was behind the origins or the enthusiasm for science. So the first one is, one hoped to understand God's goodness and wisdom best, and that would be Leibniz. One believed in the absolute utility of knowledge, That would probably be Bacon. One thought that in science one possessed and loved something unselfish, harmless, self-sufficient, and truly innocent, in which man's evil impulses had no part whatever. I think he's right on. I think that's a lot of people even today think about that in terms of scientific discovery. And I know it's hard. Science has come so far, especially with medicine and biology. And there's a presumption built in that it's all going to be good, but there's a very dark side to the understanding the human genome as well, and being able, like the I forget what the technology is where they can splice the gene splicing technology. That I find scary. It's like crypto or something. It's not that. It's Clipper. Maybe it's Clipper or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Anybody have any thoughts on this? Or do you all agree with me?
I don't know. I do think that I'm going to wait for Jason and then I'm going to respond.
Oh, okay, Jason.
Well, well, can you say what's the third one? You talk the first one is Leibniz, the second one is Bacon. Who is the third one? What's the third idea?
I guess he says Spinoza.
I think
The name
so. And
Spinoza.
what's
I
the
didn't-
problem of Spinoza?
What?
What he talk about Spinoza?
That's what the main motive of Spinoza, who felt divine when attaining knowledge. And
Yes.
that's that in science one possessed and loved something unselfish, harmless, self-sufficient, and truly innocent. I think Spinoza believed that he could deduce God philosophically and scientifically, because that's the way a lot of one of his books I know is built on that. The argument is he just builds toward that ultimate idea God exists.
Does the first one talking about does he talk about Newton for the God's goodness and the wisdom? He mentioned Newton, right? Englishman. And
Well, he mentioned, Newton, that's right. This was the name
yeah,
of,
and the second one he talk about morality, knowledge, and happiness. And he talk about Frenchman, which is Voltaire.
Voltaire, right?
Yeah,
Right.
and then the third one is I don't know, Jews or whatever. I don't
Spinoza.
Spinoza. Yeah. So terminology. So yeah, I see these three, but I still have a little bit hard time to consider these three things as errors. Okay. He said owing to three errors. I don't see I don't know why he called it errors. Okay, so I don't know. That's my question. But I see he criticized three philosopher or scientists. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's what he's identifying here is that the reasons these guys used to justify science were wrong. They were all errors. They were all mistakes in their own thinking. They may have uncovered great things, but their reasons were all wrong. Or something like that. Audrey.
Yeah, I think that that's true, Lindsay. I mean, I don't know if it's true. I'm certainly no ultimate truth here. But I definitely think that he's basically saying that the main issue here is that there was this knowledge we were looking for, and that this particular good knowledge is really an encapsulation of, the God's goodness, man's goodness, all of that somehow is going to make more knowledge, make us better. and give, and not harm us in any way. And that's what people believe. And they still think that all the knowledge that they're getting based on all the research, it's forgetting that the scientists too are human and they are just like us, and they have their biases, and even as far as what you want to research has to be a priority for you. It's not just the accidental science, something that happens accidentally and say, oh wow, we made an incredible discovery, let's try this over and over and see if it works, and we could tell the people. It wasn't always like that. It was actually intentional. I'm going to check this, I'm going to do this. And so already they made it so important. And we believe it as gullible beings that, some things work and some things don't, but science isn't as necessarily knowledge. It might show you or present, but I don't know at what point science was when he was writing, when Nietzsche was writing. So it's hard not for me to think about in general what it's happened because of it. And it's either religion or science, as if they're two separate things, and both things are power and money. So
Yeah, that's right. That's probably where he's going. That's good. It'll be interesting to see how this theme gets developed, because I'm guessing he might be headed in that direction. Well, the first thought I had about a lot of this was CRISPR, by the way. That's the gene splicing technology.
oh, I thought you meant CRISPR, a CRISPR. Sorry, I thought you were talking about my definition. I mean, my interpretation. I have a CRISPR interpretation.
Yes. Yeah,
Bitch.
no. Yeah, I deserve that. That's the gene splicing method, CRISPR or something, whatever. And I think that the atomic bomb is another one that is kind of disturbing. I'll just put it that way. Barbara.
Yeah, well, I think in this one, he seems to be saying something similar to what he was saying about the Reformation, that it was backward looking, and that it was taking the facade of something old that wasn't necessarily bad, but didn't have the core to go with it. And I think he's warning against trying to blend humanism and science, humanism being the old tradition, or the tradition that, let's say, promotes free will, that thinks about the value of human life, and without letting go of that, trying to sort of drag it behind you into the modern world. And he's saying, once again, that that's a mistake.
Yeah, I agree with you. Nathaniel.
Thanks. So I was I don't know, I was thinking, like, I was talking to my mom this week and she talked about the Stanford prison experiment. And I guess they found out that a lot of the data was actually like fudged or something, not fudged, but like misreported, because Phillips and Bardo, the guy who created it, he wanted to see certain results, and so he like encouraged the guards to be cruel to the prisoners and stuff like that. So I think what Nietzsche's getting at is, like, something that, yeah, science is a very good tool, but human motivation, and like other people were saying, like will and power and stuff like that are always going to be present within science. I think Nietzsche here is getting at this kind of post-enlightenment type of thinking where they become critics, of the, science to some degree, saying, no, it's not objectively true with a capital O, like not like big O, like you're not God, you're still a human and you have motivations and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think that's what he's getting at, maybe. Thanks.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah. Are we in general agreement that these ideas did motivate a lot of science. I think this is one that I know I can agree with what he's saying here unequivocally. That even a lot of science today is justified because it's supposed to have, science is supposed to be the last one. Unselfish, harmless, self-sufficient, and truly innocent. And I think a lot of people working in science today actually feel that way. Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. No, I don't think I agree with the general sentiment of the discussion so far. Um, I have a strong affinity towards science. I agree that it's utilized in different ways by people with different motives, but the underlying expansion of human knowledge in general, I would say, is the main force that creates human liberation. And I think I'm in a disagreement with Nietzsche in that respect. Well, maybe not, because so I think there seems to be a general attitude, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, in the conversation, that Nietzsche thinks that science is good or something comparable to that, but it can be misused. I don't think that's correct. I don't think Nietzsche is a fan of science overall. And the other thing is that Nietzsche's goals, I think, are very divergent from most modern people's goals. Nietzsche is very much an elitist, and he's only focused on the experience. Yeah.
We don't know all of that yet.
Okay, I'll just stop there.
Okay. Audrey.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. I definitely still stand by what I said, but I don't know if science is something that I think that feeling that you know everything, it gives you a solidified being in some way. You start to see that you start to believe in ultimate truth. It has to be proven. It can't be proven, so therefore it can't be true. In other words, you stop thinking. And so you want to be presented with exploration. You want to see the results. You want to see that in certain areas, vaccines work here. Maybe something else might work later on. It's not vaccines for the rest of your life kind of thing. But who knows, because nobody's going there because we figured it out. We did it. So it's the only way to do it. And so that's what I see him going after. And being institutionalized, creating a system where there's an answer. That's what I think he's against in terms of Christianity and in terms of science when he talks like this. By aphorism, I can't go beyond the aphorism. So it seems like that's where he's going. So
Yeah, one of the thoughts that I had here was the idea that, let me think about how to do this. The accumulation of knowledge is not much more than the accumulation of knowledge. In some ways, it's like medicine. Medicine seems to be in a different sort of situation. But a lot of scientific endeavor just results in more knowledge and more jobs for college professors, and it doesn't really improve or enhance life in any way. This is partly his attack on historicism back in the untimely meditation. And I'm based on the birth of tragedy, which we read earlier. Science is kind of a bugaboo, and so this is a bit of another way of coming at a negative impression of science. Marx said that the accumulation of knowledge leads to human liberation. I don't think that's true at all. And Well, okay, even with the biological sciences, CRISPR, again, I don't know if that scares any of you, but it scares the shit out of me. Anyway, Audrey.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I've totally, because of your talking, I totally forgot what I was gonna say. So, sorry. So, yeah, I don't remember, so I'm not gonna try and conjure up.
Well, it'll come back to you, I'm sure. Nick.
Yeah, thanks. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I find this interesting because actually it puts this paragraph in the context of the philosophical tradition, because there are always two schools of thought. One emphasizes on rationality, the other emphasizes the human spirit part of it. And the German's thought is interesting because the German, as a country, produced a lot of solid scientists, but also in the 19th century, they reacted in the philosophical area to the British and French quote unquote rationalist materialists. And here, obviously, Newton is cited, Voltaire also cited. And the Germans, watching the French Revolution, and had a very strong reaction in the sense of trying to have their own version of the thought, philosophy, romanticism, all that. And Nietzsche somehow, falls in that camp, in the sense that, of course, the very title of this work, is try to steer us away from a very serious, truth oriented scientific investigation, which he's not totally agree with. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the the title of the book again. It's worth just kind of reminding ourselves the gay science, meaning the playful science or something along that line. And that's the science he's probably addressing here is of course philosophy, but and that's why so many of these aphorisms kind of work the way they do, because he's just, I think in many cases, he's just throwing thoughts out there that are go against the grain, to go against the grain. And here, I don't know, Audrey.
Well, what I was going to say before is that the sentence, partly because this is right after the Newton, when he says like Newton, partly because one believed in the absolute utility of knowledge, and especially in the most intimate association of morality, knowledge, and happiness. This was the main motive. And he goes on to talk about Voltaire, but that absolute utility of knowledge, I mean, sounds like what Mark was expressing before, that he believes. And I question that, and especially in when it comes to morality and on all the stuff that we're dealing with now, with people telling us how to behave and what we should be doing, and the shoulds and the oughts, kind of thing. And so I think, yeah, so the main motive of Spinoza, who, thinks that, attaining knowledge is divine. So these are all these three errors. It's the absolute knowledge within this morality, knowledge, and happiness. I think it's because, he's always talking about, becoming, he's just, he's talking about plurality. And his aphorisms to date that. I mean, there's more than meets the eye here. And so, at least in these aphorisms, that's what I see. It makes things clearer for what I read after. It's very interesting to go
Yeah,
back.
well, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah. that's what I was thinking of, is that when we get to some of these other things, and I've done this, and I think some of the rest of you have, there's value, I think, in referring to prior aphorisms that either support this point of view or challenge this point of view.
And thanks to science, we can. Because we can split our screen and look at the aphorisms when we're reading another book. And that's a good thing. So science is helpful there, but we're not going to come up with absolute knowledge.
Well, okay then. Just lay it out there. It's that desire for certainty. When I got out of that, and that was aphorism 3, I think, or yeah, intellectual conscience. That was it. Constantly challenge what you think is you've arrived at the truth. Really, really look really hard and deep at what you think is the truth, and see if there isn't more. And I think that Nietzsche just feels like there is no end to that pursuit. Okay, 38. The explosive ones. I think this is like completely true. I think this is a great psychological observation about youth. What attracts them is the sight of the zeal that surrounds a cause, as it were, the sight of the burning fuse, not the cause itself. And I think that's really true. I think and it's not just young men either. I have a feeling a lot of young women today also invest themselves in causes and ideas when they're young, because it's a thing to do. There's something exciting about being part of a movement or something like that. Do you agree with me? Yes, you do. Audrey. You're muted, Audrey.
Yeah, I have to think about this a little. I don't, my first thought is I don't agree. But that's just my first thought. So let somebody
Okay.
else.
Nicole.
Can I ask her, because we all used to be young. So do you guys feel like you were explosive when you're young? Or it doesn't apply to every single person?
I think I'm still explosive.
Oh, so cute.
I wanted to
No,
be.
it's not cute.
It's
I'm
not
learning
cute.
a lot.
You don't think it's cute? So it's called cranky.
I was attracted to causes that were lost when I was young. The
What?
underdog always had an appeal because they were the underdog, not because they had great ideas or any of that sort of stuff, but just because they were the underdog. I voted for Richard Nixon for that reason more than once. And it took me a long time to get over that. Jason.
Doesn't matter you are a young man or young woman or old man. I think they are the same. All consider how much the energy of whoever needs to explode. Okay, I think young man just a example. Okay, young woman, old man, old woman, all possible. I think the contract is see the last sentence. Reason are not what win over such powder cats. All right, powder cats must be the fuse, the explosive one, the energy, the sensation, the feeling, and that which is much stronger than reason, right? Rationality. So the driving force, okay, for example, we all come here for philosophy. The driving force is not the reason because I want to do something. Therefore, I come here because we have the passion, the explosive one. We have this energy. We want to come here. I think that's he's talking about. That's the driving force, not the reason, not the cause. It's the energy.
Well, okay, He's isolating that to young men, though. Do you think there's a reason for that? I mean, you've expanded it, and maybe that's what he intends.
I
I
think
don't really
it's
know.
not specific talk about young men. Well, during that time, it's yeah, that's true. 19th century Europe, okay, they don't see much women has,
Well,
right? You think
the-
he's specific talking about only young men?
well, I'm going to modify that just a little bit because I included young women as well. When young women can even be part of it now, I just don't know if they would be. But young men are the soldiers of the world. And I remember there was a TV series about Troy, and I'm a big fan of Homer and Troy and the Trojan War. And they cast it with a bunch of young actors instead of like Brad Pitt is in. I love that movie, and I can't remember. He plays Achilles, whatever yeah. And this was not like that. This was a bunch of young men. And I never thought when I'm reading Homer, I don't see young men, but only young men can be persuaded to go to war just because it's war.
So
You know,
I'm sorry, I don't see this one is related to war, right? This aphorism.
well, I'm just giving you an example of that
Okay.
explosive, literally explosive energy, right? It's a young,
I'm more think that this one is more on talking about reason. Okay, reason is not the cause. The energy is the cause. I think that's he's talking about. That's why
yeah,
he talk about.
no,
So it doesn't matter go to the war or go to the invent a new machine or join the meetup group for philosophy. They all require is energy, not the reason.
yeah,
I think that's what you want to talk about. So.
yeah, but I don't think any of us are hiding powder kegs, and that's why we're here.
That's a metaphor, right? Powder keg is a metaphor. We all have a powder keg to share what we thought, to learn, right? That's just the metaphor. Okay. That's what I thought.
Okay, well, the fuse on my powder keg ran out a long time ago.
Yeah,
Mark.
nothing with military. That's just the metaphor. That's how I read it. Okay, so
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. My viewpoint is pretty sympathetic to Lindsay's here, and to me, the military metaphor makes sense because the way I think about a cause, it's an abstraction, and in order to devote oneself to an abstraction, one needs some kind of moral sentiment in the sense of some kind of self-negation, negation of one's own identity, one's own comfort, safety, food, social, sexual motivations, financial motivations, um, suppressing or neglecting all that in order to feed into something else. And the soldier is the ultimate metaphor for this because you're actually sacrificing or potentially sacrificing one's life for an ideal. So this abstract identity constructed out of some kind of moral sense, whether that be, for freedom or the nation or the proletarian revolution or the Aryan race or whatever that abstraction is, the identity of a person who's willing to sacrifice their life for that abstraction has suppressed their own or suppressed or negated, denied their own specific survival instinct and their own specific desires and their own specific preferences. And I see that as something that is more particular to young people and to men for a couple reasons. Young people, because young people are molded ideologically in the family and in institutions like the church or later on the school. And once they start to get life experience, they start to have doubts about their ideological molding. And so the ideals, the things that they were certain about when they were younger, they start to see things about the dogmas that they learned or the ideals that they learned that don't really make sense, that don't jive with their experience. So they lose that fervor, that ferocity for that ideal. And then for men, there's two reasons here, I think. in general, it's my opinion that men are more biologically violent than women. Some people may disagree with that, but I think that is the case. Men are more prone to violence than women. And violence, the imposing of oneself on others, is a core aspect of a kind of moral expression. The idea that this is not right, I'm going to exert myself in order to change it. I'm going to use some kind of enthusiasm or force to change something in the world. And the other thing is, women in general, I'm just making a generality here, I think are stronger, have a stronger social connection. They have a stronger, in a certain sense of themselves as people instead of like as abstractions, like causes. And so, one, less willing to sacrifice their lives because they have something that they value more in their personal reality. And two, just because of the historical nature of war being a lot of it based on strength, physical strength. But I think the aggression is really important too, which is independent of the strength. Because like even now, anybody can pick up an AR-15 and mow down a classroom full of kids, but not very many women do that. But any woman has the physical capability to do that, but they don't have the same mental aggression.
Okay.
That's my point. Thank you.
You're kind of off the aphorism now. Okay, Nicole. Yeah, you.
Okay. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is, you know, like the last sentence here saying that there's no effort to furnish reasons for their cause. The thing is, when you're explosive, you cannot control your emotions, and you do things just based off this like passion, uncontrollable passion. Obviously, you don't know what kind of reasons can control you. Like when you are emotionally triggered, there's nothing can control you, literally, right? Even you know the reasons, you can't control it. That's why he said, you know, reasons are not what wins over such power cakes. So that really makes sense. You have to calm down first before you can control yourself. I think, you know, right? Like control our monkey mind. I do believe sometimes the explosive energy you can use it as like advantage, but most of the time it can be dangerous in the sense of maybe hurting yourself in a way. Like when you can't figure things out, you don't know how to, like, you get overwhelmed, don't know what exactly is going on with yourself, right?
Yeah. Okay. I just read that, I guess the third sentence over again. Subtle seducers therefore know the art of arousing expectations of an explosion while making no effort to furnish reasons for their cause. This sounds a bit like revolutionary groups. And he had some historical knowledge of the French Revolution and Marx, the 1848 in France, and maybe that's a little bit of what he's talking about here, that all you have to do is dangle the notion that you may get to do this, and that's all you have to do to enlist. And you know, the war metaphor is still sort of alive for me here.
That's the point.
I think the war metaphor is definitely in here too. I see it that because that's what that's what he's experiencing, men going to war, and I guess also those two revolutions where you know everybody's going crazy trying to kill people for a cause, and you know, I mean, but this is like long before, you know, some of the I don't know if, you know, Marxism and did he see that? No, he didn't see that.
What?
Was Marxism. When
no,
I'm confused.
Marxism as a concept wasn't really well developed at all.
Right, yeah. So it's so basically he's talking about the French and what other uprisings were there when he was around? I'm just trying to see if it has to do with.
I think that it's just the idea that you can round up younger men.
To go to war, to, you know, for, you know, we own this.
They're
You're-
powder keg with. They
We
have to
keep
be.
losing you. You're
Oh.
speaking, but you're not like through.
Oh, am I coming through now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I think I was just mumbling.
Oh,
The men have to be, the young men have to be powder kegs to begin with. And then those are the people that you can recruit. I don't think he needed a whole lot of war experience because a lot of
right,
people
right.
war just because it was a war. They didn't care what it was really about one way or the other. And
Well,
I
it was
think
about what's mine.
what?
It has to do with what's, it seems your explosive stuff that you want to take care of. I mean, it's so different than the movements today. I mean, you know, so I don't know back then what they were fighting against.
Well,
They didn't, people, they wanted their own land. For some reason, I don't hear you when you're talking.
hear me? Am I coming across?
You're in and out.
No, to me it's quite clear. Yeah, Lindsay is clear.
Really? Well, I dropped the microphone a minute ago and maybe something happened. I'll have to, can you hear me now? Yeah.
No, I hear you. It's just that I also see your mouth moving when I don't hear you.
Oh, that's the delay of the internet.
Oh.
Okay, maybe I've got low bandwidth or something. I don't know. Anyway, he fought in the Franco-Prussian War in 1870. So he had personal experience of war, and I don't think he thought that was a particularly stupid war when he was in it. Based on some stuff that I think was in Birth of Tragedy. Well, anyway, Mark. No, I hope I did.
Sorry, I'm on my phone and I had trouble navigating a little bit. Yeah, I just wanted to add some historical context because a lot of questions came up. One person commented in the text that the Communist Manifesto was published in 1848, and that is correct. But I've looked into this question quite extensively, and I don't believe there's any evidence that Nietzsche knew who Marx was. I don't think he references him in anything he wrote. But Nietzsche was a critic of socialism, and Marx wasn't actually that famous in the 19th century, although his influence was growing. Nietzsche criticized specifically Düring, who was a leading German socialist in like the 1870s, 1880s. So there's a lot of criticism of socialism, but not specifically like that revolutionary brand of socialism. And about the context, there was a gob of revolutions in the 19th century in Europe. Of course, there was the aftermath of the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars. Then there was the 1848 revolution, which swept all across Europe and affected every country. And then, as Lindsay mentioned, the Franco-Prussian War resulted in the Paris Commune and the uprising there. So there was a whole bunch of like a fervent revolutionary movements in that century that Nietzsche would have been aware of, but not Marxism specifically. There's no evidence that he knew about that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Any last thoughts on this one? Because we're going to wrap. Yeah, Jake.
Sounds like everyone is talking about war, okay? And I just, for the record, I disagree. I think there's nothing about war. He just say young man has a full of energy, and the energy drive young man, not the reason drive the young man. That's it. And he's not complaining. In a way, he probably praised this kind of effort, not going to the war, not talking about going to the war specifically. He is talking about pursuing knowledge, doing anything you need energy, not the reason. That's I want to say, but sounds like people are not thinking this way. So
yeah, not thinking about what the cause actually might mean or represent. but the enthusiasm is part of it. It's like acting unreasonably because your emotions are pushing you to that, right? And this is a theme we've encountered before, that there are different kinds of motives for action, and some of them are very irrational and unreasonable, which I think is exactly the same thing.
Yeah, but Nietzsche's undertone is this is good. Okay.
Well,
Mm,
it's not being really too critical here. Yeah, you're right. Okay. So we're going to wrap on this one, and so we're going to do, and I'm going to publish this right after we're done here, because I'm like, all I have to do is put in the aphorisms. So we're going to do 3945. And I'm going to, I have this all set up, so I think I can just boom, do this. Okay. Thank you guys for being here.
okay, bye-bye. Enjoy your week.
Well, you enjoy yours too, Audrey and Nick
Well, I
Cole.
will, explosively.
So cute.
You should base on your reason to enjoy it.
All right.
Bye bye, Audrey.
Bye.